Hello and welcome to another episode of the Magical World of G. Michael Vasey podcast series. I don't know what episode it is. I've forgotten season 5 or 6 and many episodes for you to enjoy and look back on either in audio format or indeed in video format on YouTube. And in this episode, I'm talking to a local and a friend of mine, Shaun Copple. Now, I've known Shaun for a long time. We both live in Brno. He is another expat that lives here. But in the last couple of years or so, we've been periodically meeting and chit-chatting about various initiatives that we're both doing. And he's got now gone into coaching, energy coaching. And he is quite a spiritual person when you get talking to him. So I thought it'd be good to have a chit chat with Shaun and talk about Brno Breakthru, which is his initiative here, where he's trying to help raise the energy of people in Brno, trying to help wake people up and sort of move them on their way and introduce them to a larger world through his coaching practice. And one of the things that Shaun does is he organizes a monthly walk and talk, a hike of around 16 kilometers in and around the Brno area. And as you know, I like to hike. So last weekend, I actually joined Shaun, and I'll include some video of that hike. It was really good. And during that, of course, it's just an opportunity to chit chat. And who knows, 5 minutes of conversation with someone may well change their life. At least that's the way that Shaun thinks about things. So without further ado, let's get to the conversation. But one last thing. I find quite often that in these conversations, the best bits, the juicy bits, the really good stuff happens towards the end. I don't know why that is, but it's always the case. So please, rather than just listen to the first 20 minutes, please listen all the way through. Or if you must, skip halfway and go to the end, because that's the best bit. I promise you, that's where all the juicy stuff and all the good stuff is, right at the end. So lastly, please do like, share, and subscribe. The more subscribers to this channel, the better the channel will do on the YouTube platform. And I'd like to reach more people. So please help me do that. Subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much. And here's Shaun.
So yeah, what I am interested in right now is the energy of Brno and what I can do to use my energy as an individual to kind of uplift or shift the energy in Brno. And so what I've been doing for nearly a year is monthly walk and talk events where I invite people from the community, mainly expats, but also I've had a few Czech people come too and Slovaks. Um, and then we just go for a walk somewhere around Brno Venkov in the countryside. So very often we'll take a train out somewhere and then do a hike and then come back to Brno, have some food somewhere as well. And within that event, the aim is really to shift perspectives. So it's inviting people to come with perhaps some problems that they might be experiencing in their life. And then also, they may have read some things on the news or experiencing some things that they're not sure of how to make sense of. And so then it's a really safe, open environment for people to just share and to be vulnerable and to have a conversation with somebody that's a professional. So, and that professional is me. And so then that's where I connected my coaching, professional coaching with community. Um, and that's where the goal is, yeah, to shift that, the energy of Brno
So
through
this
meeting
is
with
this is
people.
something new, right? I mean, this is something you started in the last few years. What got you there? What is it about your personality or your past, your experience that brought you to
Mm.
this point where you would give up like a normal day job and start
Yeah.
doing this?
Yeah. So it's a journey that I think many people are going through now. So I was in corporate management for many years. Um, and before that, I was going through many different career changes. Every 2 or 3 years, I was changing and doing something different from when I left school. Um, so yeah, I left school at 17, straight into the workplace, and then just yes, was moving around doing different things. And then I found my way almost by accident into being a team leader while I was still living in the UK. I was a team leader in a Tesco's Express, so that was my first taste of having responsibility for people doing their job and making sure that they have the skills to do their job to the best of their ability. And yeah, being in a supermarket environment, it was a little bit in your face. In today's world where everything kind of happens online, there
Yeah.
was no escape from people. So if you annoyed somebody or somebody didn't want to do what you asked them, you're right there confronted by people in a supermarket environment. So it was very challenging going into that environment without any prior leadership experience. So it was really learning by the coattails, really. I don't know what the metaphor is with learning things on the go. Um, but yeah, it was really exciting. And then from there, um, that was when we made the decision in 2008 to move over here to the Czech Republic to look for opportunities. And so then I was working for an American company, which is sadly about to close. But back then, it was $1 billion company, and it was a company called Monster, the
Yeah.
job site. So I worked for them for 14 years, from being one of the first five people in Brno to then, yeah, slowly but surely moving around all the different organizations that they had, customer service, back office. And then we were moving in some analytical roles, which is where I then really found my feet within an organization. So then we were then recreating another startup within the service center to then build a team out. So then I was working with people from the US, from in Prague, uh, and that was when I started to realize that what I enjoyed most was the people side, working with people, developing people, coaching people to excel in themselves and to learn new skills and to put those skills into their work and to be passionate about that whole process. Um, and so then within the corporate environment, it was kind of challenging because corporations tend to fund hiring higher than retention.
Hmm.
And so very often I was losing these great people and then having to start again with new people. Um, so I was really starting to lose kind of my investment with that process within the corporate environment. And so then with some leadership changes in our organization, I then stepped out of people management, direct management. So then I did some project program work for a while, and that didn't really sit well with me. That kind of hastened my kind of deeper purpose and realization that it is people focused. I need to be working with people rather than abstract programs and moving beans about. Um, so then I was receiving some coaching from the company, and through that coach, she kind of helped me onto the path to then know which direction to go in to become a coach myself, to have the training and to realize the kind of coach that I want to be. So I did some research, and it was going to be a quite expensive endeavor to get that training, and
Yeah,
so
right.
that then kind of forced my hand to look for a position that was going to be outside my comfort zone in order to have increased um, earning power to make that investment. So I did that for a year. So I ticked that box in several ways. So throughout my career, I had not worked within HR. So I wanted to go into HR and learn all about HR and HR operations from the back end rather than being a front end team manager. I wanted to know what the back end was directly. So I got that experience. I did that for a year, and I built a whole bunch of different teams there and was quite burned out by the end of it. It was a lot on my plate. Um, so that was when I was kind of halfway through the coach training, and I realized that the two things were kind of clashing quite a bit. So I left the corporate world at that point and was then working for myself. So that was 2.5 years ago.
That would have been
And
about the time we had a drink, was it? As I
I think
recall.
so. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. We went out for a beer. That's right. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I was still kind of my own personal energy at that point when I started was still quite heavy with am I doing the right thing? You know, leaving my very well paid corporate job to do something that I may not work. Um, so that was a kind of transition in my own energy, and then as I consciously then became more and more aware of, yes, that was the right decision, and now let's get going. Let's start making moves and start creating. And so that then, last year was when things really started to move, and I felt more at ease with that energy, and then my purpose was starting to come to the forefront.
But behind all this, you did some kind of training, and you talked about it yesterday evening. The energy model that you and
Yeah,
I actually was one of your customers early on because I actually took your questionnaire and got
you
your
did. Yeah, you
feedback
took the
on the different
assessment.
energy
Yeah.
levels. Yeah. What's all that about? Where's that from? Who's the behind that and what's it mean?
Yeah, so an entity from the US called IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and I can't remember the exact year it started, but it was around it must be the early 2000s. Um, I'm gonna have to think back now to the training. So it was a guy called Bruce Schneider, and so what I know now is that these 7 levels are actually closely related to cognitive behavioral therapy. And so what he did was connect this framework of 7 levels, which is quite easily digested and as a framework with more consciousness and energy. And so he filtered some of the understandings about how consciousness is kind of multi-level. So higher consciousness is, let's say 2000, and then all of the really heavy energy and consciousness of like anger and hatred, that real heavy stuff is then the low levels. So he filtered and kind of reduced all of that into 7 levels, which worked really nicely with some of the frameworks around cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's quite a mesh as I now understand it. And so yeah,
What I
the
like about it
framework
is
is
that
seven
there's the no
levels.
judgment thing, like all set. It's not like you're trying to get from level whatever to level one, or don't know which way around it is, but it's not
No,
like a promotion
no, no,
ladder
no.
or something. It's like a personality map or a personality driver map, isn't it? So you're going to have aspects of all of them, even the base energies and the higher energies. And I suppose there is an idea that you try to build into the higher energies and leave some of the baser ones behind.
Sure,
But it's like
sure.
a personality map, isn't it?
It's a little bit like a personality map, but it goes so much deeper because it is more about the consciousness. So it's more about how you show up and how your energy shows up. So, for example, part of what we do is use the person's own scenarios to then map that onto the 7 levels as what's working, what isn't working. So, for example, you get a late night email from your boss, "Hey, I need this done for tomorrow," and so then each of those 7 levels will give you an option for you to then choose how you respond to that late night request, right? So level one is the victim. Why is this happening to me? Oh, I can't cope with this, right? So
Yeah.
then as you go then through the 7 levels, you slowly but surely learn how to just not respond with any of that kind of negativity and the disadvantages of that because it's very disempowering. Um, and so then it helps you to, yeah, shift higher, which is then helping you to gain more of that deep inner peace. Um,
there's a couple of things I want to kind of draw out because yesterday when I was listening to you go through it again for the second or third time, it struck me that there are. Have you come across the Kabbalistic tree of life at all?
yeah, so one of the other coaches was from that
It
area.
struck me
Yeah,
that there's some overlap there because
for
if you look at
sure.
your seven levels of energy, and then you look at the what's called the Sephiroth or the Sephira on the tree of life, the bottom seven that would be, some degree of substance. They're not just concepts, male and female polarities or energy
Mm,
and matter. As you were talking, I suddenly realized that whoever put that together, if they didn't know about the Kabbalistic tree of life, inadvertently they picked up on some of it because there's some deep similarities. And I remember, writing an article after doing my magical classes in the UK about how the tree of life basically translates into creating reality, making plans, blueprints, turning it into making some choices about materials and styles and colors, and gradually but surely you build something into reality. And the energies that go into that process are the same seven energies that you talked about. And it really,
mm.
I was going to say something and then I realized there was a bigger audience and, to hell with it. I'll save it for just me and you. But do you know if there is any overlap between like the Kabbalistic tree of life and that model, or is that just me seeing something there that's not there?
I don't know if that has been directly meshed in, but because it's consciousness work, and so all of the past of humanity that has come to this awareness of the consciousness, there's so many different aspects to it and ways of interpreting it.
Yeah,
So because these seven levels of energy are quite a simple way to look at it, it's programmatic, it's easy to digest. The If you have other experiences of consciousness and different frameworks and methodologies, it will feel really familiar because it's all different interpretations of what is the same thing, right? The consciousness.
yeah,
Um, and so that makes sense that you're feeling familiar with it from that different perspective because that's where your background is, and that's why it feels like an insight. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Um, and that's what it's kind of designed to do: help the person understand their own experience and help them then to make the insights to help them move forward and make better, more conscious decisions in the future. Um, so it's kind of like the different lenses, right? So each of the seven levels is a different lens that you can choose to look through. So whichever one is going to be the best option for you at any given time, it's like changing your glasses, or one of the things that I used to say when I was in management was I'm going to take my hat off for a moment of being a manager. I'm going to put my hat on of being a coach, or so it helps the person to understand that there's different perspectives at any given time.
mm,
And so even though I may disagree with you, it's just a perspective and I may not have the right one. And so it helps the person to then see that reality is really just observable like that. And so then it's all just what is it that you're seeing and what am I seeing and what are the differences, but what are we seeing that's the same? And so it helps the person not to feel so emotionally invested in the thing in like an identity way or the opinionated way. It helps to kind of separate it out, and then what is it that we're seeing as individuals, but what's the bigger thing here? How do we step back and then see the bigger picture? uh,
yeah.
yeah.
The other observation was that some of the work that I'm involved with on the dowsing side and so on is basically led by a guy called Rory Duff in the UK, and
Mm.
he's convinced. And have you ever heard of Rudolf Steiner?
You've mentioned him once or twice before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay,
remember you telling me.
so basically, I won't go there, but where I'll go is that Rory is quite convinced that we're sort of transitioning from an individual to a group mind, not like the Borg, but more of an empathetic to more of an empathetic
Sure.
society where we can read each other better. And he's also
Yep.
trying to drive people to meditate in groups because the group somehow brings the best out of all the individuals, and all the individuals in the group contribute, and so you build a picture faster and more complete of what it is spiritually you're trying to achieve. And
Yeah.
you mentioned moving. It seemed to me, maybe I got it wrong, but it seemed to me you mentioned moving from like being very driven by sort of base emotions, insecurity, ego, and getting into more of a collaborative phase. So that's also reflected in that model, isn't it? This sort of idea of moving into a group think, being an
Yes.
individual within a group.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And that's where, the work is helping humanity shift its consciousness higher, one person at a time. And yeah, if you're going to work in a group, and many of the coaches that come through iPEC, they do group coaching. Um, yeah, and group meditation. It is then people are still experiencing it individually, but in a group environment, you're able to affect more people at the same time. So that makes sense. Yeah, and that's where, as I said in the beginning, that's what I'm trying to do, without it being, too kooky or esoteric or funky energy. That is what I'm trying to do, and I'm quite clear about that. That's what I'm trying to do. Help people to shift and to access more of that harmonious energy where people are able to see differences as just kind of arbitrary things that don't really affect the person, like you said, with the emotional states and so on. Um, and that really chimes with me because there was a period of time when I was younger that I was quite argumentative. My family would vouch for me quite a lot on that. And a lot of my energy was around that kind of thriving on that conflict and purposefully just arguing with people, and my dad was quite religious for a time, so I would argue with him, me being an atheist, um, and just really just argue. There was one time we were in Prague, and he was visiting, and so I went to Prague, and we had a night out in Prague, and we were obviously drinking, and then we were both standing in the middle of the night in Václavské náměstí, and he got up on the bench in the middle of Prague, and he was like almost proselytizing to me, arguing with me, and I'm shouting at him like, "No, that's rubbish!" And we ended up with a crowd of people standing around us, some of which were prostitutes, but that's another story. Um, but yeah, so for a time I was very argumentative and trolling, and slowly but surely I realized that kind of energy isn't going to help anyone. It's just clashing. And so I was then slowly but surely aiming to do less of that and more connection. And then, yeah, just working with the consciousness, my own consciousness, and seeking to be more of a mediator with people. And that's where, in my walk and talk event, it's fresh perspectives in the great outdoors. So whenever someone comes with something potentially tendentious, like we've had some Israeli people, and we've had some the one last week that there was a Pakistani guy, so there's a lot of potential for some hot topics that comes up. And so what I've learned is to just be curious. So I tap into my coaching curiosity and then just play around with the ideas and playfully push back on things that may be said, and then bring humor to it, and that way it's much more lighter and harmless rather than it being a clash. Um,
I was on the last one, obviously. I saw
yeah,
you. you didn't really make, I mean, it didn't seem to me, I was obviously engaged dowsing as I normally am, but I was
Yeah,
watching. You didn't sort of force yourself on people or have any rules, or you just walked along and people just sort of talked to each other as they walked. So one minute you talk
yeah.
to one person, the next minute to someone else. So it's a nice informal and unpressured sort of environment. But at the end of the day, what impact do you think you're having by doing it?
Um, yeah, getting validation on the actual impact it without me directly asking people, and I have started to do that. I've sent a few people, "Hey, how did you find it?" and to try and gauge some of the feedback that way. But ultimately, um, I bumped into somebody. So she hasn't come on one of the walk and talks, um, but we had met last year, I think, at a writing group that I go to. And so she's an American, she's a therapist. So we were kind of on common ground quite a lot. So then I bumped into her a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, "Oh my God, Shaun, everyone's talking about Brno Breakthru. It's amazing." And so for me, that is like instantly, yeah, you got me. Like that. Now I know that it's working. If people are talking about it and someone that I know comes up to me and tells me that's great. So without having any specifics around that, just having one person say, "Oh yeah, people are talking about it." That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea. I think it can really work. I guess me, being the kind of person I struggle with the specifics of it because I always look for a specific end game, whereas you seem to be much more content to sort of just stoke the fires a little bit and see where it goes. That's not me at all. You know me anyway. You know what I'm talking
Yeah, yeah,
about.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
was
And I,
intrigued watching you just sort of stoke the fire a little bit, poke the fire here and prod it a bit there and let it flame and burn. And I'm like, wow, but where's that going?
yeah, yeah. And I don't know where it's going. I don't have an end game. I'm just doing what I feel passionate about
Yeah. Well, you do
today.
a great job of it, I think. And you're also
Yeah,
involved in a lot of other groups in Brno, right? So you meet a lot of people. So you're actually influencing all the time, right? Within that context in a similar sort of way.
sure. Yeah, and I mean that's where my experience from the corporate world, influencing people and playing some of those kind of Machiavellian skills. I have that in my toolbox if it's needed, but I would prefer not to be, pulling the strings like that. I would prefer to be doing it much more on my purpose level, which is much more deeper and fulfilling. And so, reaching that realization that that is my experience, but I don't want to use it, I think is a big deal for many people that they perhaps don't reach that realization. And that's where many people are living their entire existence unconsciously, just doing this grind, this grift. Uh, and that they're the types of people that I am aiming in Brno to reach and to wake up and to say, hey, your life doesn't have to be that way. Your life could be something else if you only wanted it, if you could see it. Um,
Yeah, so in a
so
sense, you're actually trying to wake people up to the bigger potential, right? And shake them out a little. Well, not shake them out. That's not the right word because you're not shaking them at all. You're basically just, and like I said, sort of poking the fire here and there a little bit to get them thinking in
yeah,
a slightly different way and wake them up. Which I've joked with you
absolutely.
a couple of times. You're the conveyor belt that hopefully leads them to me, where I can take that person that's woken up and say, "Oh, you come and do some dowsing."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. So that, I have various different people that are on a conveyor belt,
Yeah.
and so somebody may stop with me for a period of time, and then when they're ready, they may go and do something else. Um, they may come to you, or they may go and see. I know several therapists in Brno, because it's really important for me to be ethical and to be professional, to make sure that then if somebody starts working with me and then realizes, oh, I've got this thing that's causing me this emotional um,
Yeah.
challenge, that then maybe you need to go and work with a therapist. So I know a few different therapists of different types in Brno. So yeah, like I said, the conveyor belt may go in various different directions. Um, Agnes has got this massive kind of program now with the brunching, the business brunch. So that's another conveyor belt that I've helped a few people into recently, because that's what's being built kind of as we speak. Um, and that's been really helpful for me to raise my energy, because I kind of thrive more in that collaborative partnership place, which is where I was always using as a manager. So I was less of a boss, and I was more of a servant leader slash collaborator. What are we doing? What's the team doing? How can we solve this problem? I was always very much a we kind of leader. And so at the time, there wasn't so much um, awareness of that different type of leadership and management in the Czech Republic. So tentatively, I say I was a little bit ahead of my time, because now there's much more of that in the corporate world. So I know a few people that are training to be a coach within the corporate environment, um, which I think is great, because that's important work within the
Yeah.
corporation.
Yeah. Well,
So hopefully the retention and the hiring switches places, because retention is so much
yeah,
more economically
absolutely.
effective than rehiring.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
so it's completely lopsided at the moment, but I hope that it switches, because retention is, I was always focused on retention. I didn't want to lose people. But if it got to the point where I've given them so much skills and training and responsibilities that they want to leave because they want more money or they want more promotions, and that's where the retention, you should be able to provide that. And sometimes the hiring doesn't have that has higher budget than retention, which I always found that ridiculous. But yeah.
Yeah, well, let's go back to your original statement. You want to raise the energy in Brno, and I suppose what you mean by that is interpreting. You want to try to help people individually and collectively sort of wake up and raise their energies from like being victims, the victim at the bottom, to more that collaborative, the other end of the scale where they're being much more collaborative and everybody's benefiting
Yeah.
from their humanity and consciousness, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so then, as you know, with the assessment that we do through iPEC coaching, it gives you a ultimate score, the average resonating level. Um, so ideally, that goes higher the more work that you get, and more awareness and realizations that you're having through those 7 levels of energy. You get It goes higher and higher. So I've done the assessment myself a couple of times. Once when I was doing the training, and then once again, I think it was 9 months or so after I'd been working on myself using
Yeah.
that framework. So mine had significantly gone higher. And so again, yeah, it's working with people using that framework, but they may not obviously know what's happening. But I'm by tapping into more of that collaboration, which is the level 5, and then the synthesis, which is the level 6. It's what are we doing in Brno? How can we solve this problem in Brno? How can we help more people in Brno? So then I'm just part of the machine of what we're trying to do.
Mhm.
It's not me on my own. I'm not doing it for ego purposes. I'm doing it for the community as a whole. Um, and yeah, and that's
I
where,
understand. I mean, I understand.
that validation, when you get that validation and someone says, oh, Shaun, it's working, sort of thing,
Yeah.
it's, yeah, the ego is obviously going to go, oh yeah, this is amazing. But then, yeah, it's important to, use some of those other frameworks like grounding and sense making to not get carried away with, yeah, it's working, and to stay kind of within yourself and to then trust that the process is still emerging. It's not finished. It's always something else that's going to come next. Who are you becoming? And that's where, yeah, and that's probably why I don't have so much of an end game, because the moment you have an end game, it changes your pathway. It kind of locks you into something that may not then work, and so then you need to shift and change it somehow. And so what I find is more effective is to just kind of just keep it in the now. What am I doing right now? And I tend to only have next week relatively planned out and nothing else. Which is sometimes it's a little bit short termist, but the purpose is much more long term. So as long as my purpose is that raising the consciousness of Brno and the community in Brno, and that's what I'm aiming to do, that's where what I'm doing today serves that purpose one way or the other. And whether that's me needing to rest and sleep, or go for a hike, look after my self care, or whether it's going to a meeting with a client, whatever it is, that's the balance. And that's where it's making those decisions about what I need to do to serve that purpose. It's not always gung ho, pow, 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 because I did that and I got burned out. And that's not
Mm.
going to serve my purpose much, much longer term. So yeah, it's those are the lessons that I've learned.
How have you found it in terms of, you talked about mainly expats, some Czechs, but how have you been able to breach that barrier, that foreigner barrier, and reach the Czechs in a meaningful way, do you think?
Yeah, like I said, some Czechs and Slovaks have come to the walk and talks and to some of the events that I've put on and so on. Um, the really important thing, and this is about the energy and the mindset, is to not see it as a barrier actually, because those Czechs and the Slovaks, they're part of the community, and I as an expat, as a foreigner, I'm here in their country, I'm a guest. So, seeing something as a barrier is more about that conflict energy. It's them and me. So that shifting higher is more about what are we doing with the expat community and the Czechs in their country, and that's where um, some of the work that I've been doing with the Grusinka Multicultural Center. It's more around that community, the multiculturalness, which is serving the purpose for the Czechs and their society to maintain that welcoming nature for expats and for foreigners. Because the moment you lose that, then you're on the path to some of the other Western
Mm.
countries where they start pushing back against that, which is not what I want to see in Brno and the Czech Republic. Because I feel like the only way to do that is with openness and trust and serving the society and the culture of Czech Republic. So maintaining that is like really important. Um,
Yeah. I think what amazes me listening to you tonight is how many initiatives, so many different types of initiatives that I come across all the time in
mm,
terms of raising the level of human consciousness in one way or another. And it does seem, I mean, I often kind of listen to people on YouTube talking about the energies coming into the planet from the sun, and
yeah.
this evolution of consciousness, and we're about to make a big step. And the temptation is to go, "Oh, yeah, right, I've heard it all before." But actually, there is something going on, isn't there? I mean, if you look around, there's a lot of people engaged in all kinds of different initiatives, from the kind of stuff that you're doing to more spiritual pursuits, maybe like Rory's doing,
Mm,
trying to get people to meditate on earth energy nodal sites and meditate for peace and love and harmony and all that sort of thing as a group.
mm.
Something is really going on, and I think you're playing a part in that. I really do, and I think it's to
Mm,
be commended. So, do you feel
yeah.
that's the same way that there's something happening at the grassroots level, trying finally to to evolve the consciousness? Maybe it's the energies coming in from the outside. I don't know what it is, but it seems like it's the right time to do it.
I definitely have become much more in tune with my being sensitive and being sensitive towards energy and to trust my intuition much, much more. So I've always known that I was very sensitive and never really was able to make sense of it. I was very, very closed off when I was young. And like I said, I was quite conflicted and being combative with people. Um, and so as I've learned to be more open and to allow some of that energy in as part of like my inner growth, there is definitely a sense that I feel that something is starting to shift. And it's really, really related to my sense with technology as well as the, the natural world, the planet spinning through space. Because there's two components to it, and this is what I write a lot about in my poetry. It's the dissonance between the natural world spinning through space and the technical world that we're all engaged with almost 24/7 as a human race. And that dissonance is causing us to have all of this fragmentation. And so people feel that fragmentation obviously in different ways and they have different perspectives over it. But ultimately, people know something's not right. They can feel it. You go on YouTube and you watch some podcast or you watch the news or you read your newspaper, whatever it is that, people are sensing something's not quite right. What's happening here? I feel like I'm being lied to, and that's what I've noticed a lot.
Mm.
And when that happens, when a large enough portion of the human race, and obviously the human race really grew rapidly over the last
Yeah,
couple of hundred years, so the numbers need to be much bigger than it used to be. But the internet is actually going to help that process, I think. So once you reach like a critical mass of a number of people that are, what the hell is going on? I need to do some research here because I don't trust what's happening. That's where the opportunity is for people like us to help those people on their journey to awakening and to shifting and to realize, yeah, you are just an evolved ape on a spinning rock through space. You don't need all of this technology to be who you are. You can be an organic material, carbon based life form and be really happy and
yeah,
not need all of this technology stuff
yeah.
because that's what's really screwing us up. And that's why, yeah, that's the walk and talk. We go out in the country and the retreats that I'm having later in the year. It's all about engaging with the real world, going out and collecting firewood, sitting around the fire, cooking food on the fire, staring into the fire. Those are things that humans have done forever, and it's really, really important for me in my purpose to enable that place and to help people experience it, um, and just reconnect with something real to make sense of the technology.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I was listening to you talking about stepping up the energy. That's when it suddenly made sense to me. So I'm having a conflict with someone, and I'm approaching it from I'm a victim here, and
right.
basically step up the energy, take it up to a different level, stop being the victim, and address the problem in the different ways. What you're really doing, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So then instead of reacting with your pre-programmed experience where you've come from, your culture, your identity, your emotions, and all of that, by elevating your consciousness and by understanding these seven levels of energy, you can step back from that reaction and then respond with what's going to be suitable for the situation. And so, to use that situation with the boss giving you some late work, or some confrontation that you're having with a customer or something like that, it's good to ask a question. Step back and what are we trying to do here? What's this problem that we're trying to solve? How can we come at this from a different layer, a different place, a different perspective? And so then that helps the person connect with you to solve the problem, rather than it being a clash of egos and reactions and anger. Um, and so by stepping back like that and responding, it helps move things forward much more effectively.
Got it. And what were you going to say about the quantum level or something?
The quantum level. So this is my emerging understanding, and obviously the cliche is that if you think you understand it, then you don't. However, um, the quantum kind of mechanics, as I understand it, is just a way that the consciousness is emerging. Um, and so so you and I right now, we are entangled in on the quantum level because we're having a conversation. So what I'm saying, you're engaging with, and what you're saying, I'm engaging with. So our minds are kind of entangled, right? We're meshed together like that on a quantum level. So both of us at this moment are emerging into who we are becoming next. Um, and so when we talk about shifting and trying to make better choices, ultimately that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to shift yourself into a different version, emerging into a different version of yourself, right? So that's a little bit like the multiverse kind of theory, but it's happening in your mind. So you're making those decisions using the mind, which is the local version of the greater consciousness.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well,
so
of course.
that's where you don't know when the wave collapses, but then when you
Yeah.
have that realization, like, oh, that's what I'm going to choose to do. That's the realizations. But you actually already had made the decision, but you've just gained the insight to the real with the realization that that's what's now going to happen.
Fascinating overlap with the secret or the idea of creating reality. And I I wrote a book along those lines a while ago that periodically sells a copy, but it was all predicated on the idea that when you study magic, you realize that studying magic is basically self psychology. You're studying yourself. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to peel away, and it's really hard because you are you, right? So you're blind to quite a lot of the layers of the onion, so to speak, that you're sitting in because you've been taught by this person, that person, church, state, parents, girlfriend, boyfriend. So you're sitting in this
Yeah,
onion and you're trying to peel
that's
away
the programming.
these
Yeah,
layers. And, what I've found is that as you peel away those layers, because you're working on the inside, as above, so below, you actually impact the outside. So you change the world by changing yourself. And
yeah,
in essence, your this energy model is another way to, rather than sitting there stewing in your own juices, trying to figure out what the layers of the onion are and then strip them away. You're making a shift into a different mindset, which says, well, look, I know that I can play the victim and get all, or I can get into conflict mode because my ego got battered. Or I can simply decide, no, this is not where I want to go. I'm going to shift the way I see reality by moving up a level and trying to collaborate and find a way to make something happen. And in that way, I'm creating a different reality. You
absolutely.
follow what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
So yeah, like that. That's the kind of the multiverse, right? You have
Yeah.
that's what when we talk about potential, everyone has all of those pathways in front of them at any given moment.
And the
But the
whole
moment you
waking up
start to
process
think
is the
about them,
same.
you're trying to access them.
Yeah.
It can create like you're overthinking it, you're overanalyzing it, you get stuck because
Yeah.
there's just so much potential, and that's why reducing it back down to just now,
Yeah.
then you can trust that process to emerge.
Yeah. But yeah, you've got my juices flowing because yeah. What was I about to say? I forgot it again. Never
Yeah,
mind.
with the onion, the onion, what that represents is the really, really old um, truism, which is know thyself.
Yeah, know thyself. That's what magic really is. It's trying to know who you are,
Yeah,
trying to figure out who you are.
exactly.
And of course,
Yeah.
there's a very famous Czech. Well, it's not famous in the Czech Republic, but Franz Barden was a
Mm,
Czech practitioner of magic. I have three of his books on my shelf. And very few Czechs seem to know who he was. He was persecuted by both the Nazis and the commies, and he died in Brno Castle, locked up by the communists. And
mm,
he came up with this lovely little method where you would sit down and you would spend a month or a week or whatever, and you would try to pick yourself apart, everything negative, everything bad, everything that is wrong, and then you'd spend the next month and pick yourself apart looking for things that were good. And so then you'd have what he called Barden's mirror, and it was a mirror of yourself, good and bad.
mm.
And what he would then have you do is he'd have you match the all of the qualities and attributes that you pick, good or bad. You'd match them with an element. Is that a fiery thing? Is that an airy thing? Is it a watery thing? And so you would then find that from an elemental perspective, you're all fire and no earth,
Mm.
or very airy. And so then you would put together a plan to address that elemental imbalance. And you would then do things, self psychological things like affirmations. You design affirmations
Mhm.
that you say to yourself. Or when you
Sure.
get in the shower, you would imagine the bad things being washed away. Or when you drank a cup of tea, you'd imagine that the tea had something in it that magically made the good things about you stronger. So all of
Yeah.
these they're all just techniques. And I think that depending on who you are and what your personality is like, some techniques will appeal and be effective, and other techniques won't appeal and won't be as effective. But
Sure.
they're all essentially trying. Oh, I know what my thought was. They're all essentially trying to achieve the same thing. The thought was that talking about peeling the layers of the onion or moving up, that is the awakening process anyway, because there's a moment in time when you suddenly realize something's not right. And that's because you've actually started to peel away some of these layers. And in doing that, you see things that you didn't see before. When I say you've created a different reality, it's not. That reality was always there. It's just that now you're seeing something that you didn't see before.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
this painful process.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And that's where the Alan Watts book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, that really nails it, because you never know what's going to happen next in the external sense.
No, no,
But
no.
that's why it's always just emerging. That you only ever have now. The past and the future doesn't exist. They're just abstract things that we think about, um, but they're not real. You only have the now, which is real, um, and that's where, yeah, the spirituality and the consciousness. There's so many different ways and techniques, like you said, for people to connect with, and what feels right, and how that then meshes into their lives. And that's where, the conveyor belt metaphor that you use, I actually really like that, because somebody may come to me and say, "Hey, Shaun, what do you do? And what's all this about?" And I start talking about this stuff. They may not mesh with me, and that's fine, but they'll go and find somebody else now. Now they've shifted. Now their pathway and their awakening progressed by passing through my reality. So they may spend 5 minutes with me, but that's 5 minutes that's helped them on their way.
Yeah,
Um, and that's what I'm trying to do. It's not always about selling a client an expensive package of coaching sessions. It's just about spending time with people and helping them on their way, right? To use the Buddhist bodhisattva view. Um, so that's really where it's really connecting into my purpose and living with that insecurity, as well as then obviously trying to make a business and monetizing things because I've got to make a living. That's the insecurity for me. That's the challenge. Yeah,
I was going to ask
balancing it.
you about making a living. I thought, no, what bother? Let's leave it.
Well, I mean, that's also emerging,
Yeah,
right? It's an emergence, step by step.
good stuff. Right. So, Shaun, thanks so much because I'm going to leave it because I think that was a real high point and a great place to leave it. Can,
Okay,
can you
sounds
tell
good.
people where they can find out more about you and what you're up to with Brno Breakthru?
Yeah, so I have a website, it's brnobreakthru.com. And then through that, there's a contact me where you will get a free book that I wrote a couple of years ago on resilience. So we didn't really touch on resilience, but um, there's a free book for registering on my website. But then otherwise, you can find me on Facebook, which is where my community is. So that's Brno Breakthru on Facebook. And yeah, through that Facebook page, I have a link there, so then you can connect with me and book a call if you want to have a one-to-one conversation. But then people that are in Brno are welcome to join one of the future walk and talks. It's every month, and yeah, I'm just open to working with anyone, one-to-one in groups, open to anything.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
And if you're still watching, don't forget to grab some of our sexy merchandise. Hit the link.